Hello everyone, this is Grandmaster Ankit Rajpara here. I welcome all of you to the special collaboration between Chess Neurons and ChessBase India. For this episode of Strategic Mastery series, I have taken all the positions from the topic of provoking weaknesses. So I'll explain a bit more about this topic as I discuss the positions. So let's get started with the first position. By the way, if you want to attempt this position, then please pause the video here and resume once you are ready with the move. So, see, it's good to have weaknesses in opponent's camp so that we can try to take advantage of it. The weakness could be in form of a weak king could be one of them, not so good pawn structure could be one of them, not so well placed pieces could be one of them. So there are different types of weaknesses, but there will be positions where we feel like opponent might have some weaknesses or might not have some weaknesses, but definitely the activity that we have might not be enough to put pressure on those weaknesses. So what we can do in those type of scenarios, we should try to look for the ways if we can create new weaknesses in the opponent's position, and that's what we are going to look at today. So we can do something so opponent would be forced to create weaknesses in their position. So that's provoking weaknesses for you. So let's discuss about this position a bit further. So the material is equal, but white has two pawns in the center. White has double bishop advantage, so that's a good thing. But black's position is also solid actually. There are no big significant weaknesses. But white has a way with which they can force black to create weaknesses in the position, to provoke the weaknesses in black's position. And the move here to do that is bishop g4. Yeah, so black has to respond by either playing e6 or f5 to deal with this. Now let's look at what if black plays e6. After d takes e6, f takes e6, the king side has gotten a bit weaker. That e6 pawn has become an isolated pawn. Now white can actually bring the rook on the open file with a tempo, and this is under pressure, this is under pressure, this is also under pressure by the way. And queen takes a7, takes e4, the queen gets on the king side, and then this is a bit too much for black to handle with ideas like this, with ideas like this. Yeah, so that's provoking weaknesses for you. But after bishop g4, what if f5? No problem at all. E takes f5, g takes f5, and calmly the bishop comes back to f3. So what happened? See, in this position, black's king side was not that weak. These pawns are there, this bishop is also there. But if we look at now, after bishop g4, f5, see, g pawn is missing, f pawn has been pushed to f5, and because of that, their king side has gotten significantly weaker, and white is actually doing really well. White, the potential ideas for white might include rook e1, moving the bishop, and then bringing the rook to e6, or maybe bringing the queen to e2 and then moving the bishop and then doing something with the queen. So this weak king side of black is a bit of a permanent thing. So white will slowly, depending on black's response, will try to act and put more pressure there. So I hope with this discussion you got a bit more idea about what provoking weaknesses is. Now let's go for the next position. So this is black to play here, and if you want to attempt this position, please pause the video here and resume once you are ready with the move. By the way, this one is on a bit of a difficult side, so please spend a bit more of time and then make the decision. Alright, so now let's try to understand this position a bit further. So from what I can notice, black's down a pawn, but white's king is in the center. There is this open file, the queen is already there, this rook is already there, this rook could also get in at some point. So yeah, there is clear positive. Even through this this file, there's some pressure that the rook is putting. Yeah, so that's these are the positive in black's position, apart from of course being down a pawn. So now what to do? See, A really natural move seems to be this rook e7. But we have to be careful, like, we are actually increasing the pressure on this knight, but it's not like we are going to capture this, or we are significantly weakening our opponent's king side. So we should try to do more. So even though opponent's king is in the center, our pieces are active. It's not that easy for black to make the breakthrough, and there is a way with which we can do that. And if you feel like, especially if our opponent's king is in the center and such weaknesses are there, if we can bring more pieces in, then it would be great. We already have the queen, we already have the rook. This rook, of course, we can do it, but at the same time, it's doing something here. Not as much, but something. But there is one piece which is actually not doing anything at all. Yes, you have guessed it correctly. It's the king. We are going to play king d8, king e7, king f6, king g6, king h5, king g4, king h3, king g2. How about that? So, if only such, king marches could work all the time. So, yeah, of course, it is. It is this knight. So, if you look at it, it's a bit restricted. Yeah, so it's not doing much. So, if you can do something with the knight, then it would be great. And we have a way to do so. See, knight e7 seems a bit of a passive move at first, but the idea is really strong. Black wants to centralize the knight, and then black wants to play knight e3, increase the pressure on opponent's king side, put pressure on the weaknesses. But then you'd be like, okay, knight e7, I want to play knight d5. What if my opponent plays c4? Actually, that's what we were waiting for. So let's see. Knight e7. What if c4? Please remember, every pawn move creates some weaknesses. So we have actually, by provoking white to play c4, by making them stop knight d5, we have actually forced them to create some weaknesses in their position. What weaknesses? So the pawn was on c3. These two, so this square and this pawn was defended. Now it's not anymore. So what to do? It's time to put some pressure on it. And we will bring the knight back to c6 in this position. Because now this pawn is under pressure. The pawn is not defending it. Pawn is on c4 to stop knight d5. And that was the idea behind this. Now, if white tries to defend it by playing rook d2, that's not a good idea. Just knight d4. And this is checkmate. So, and let's say if opponent is like, okay, I'll slide the king over. No problem at all. We recover the pawn and look at the piece activity that we have. Knight d4, this. And now what we can do in this position is we can just liquidate into an endgame. So where not only we have a pawn, but we have an active rook as well. So that's the thing. Constantly putting pressure on the opponent. Knight e7. You want to bring the knight there. c4, no problem at all. Every pawn move creates some weaknesses. It's time to put pressure on this weakness, and then it will be a bit too much for the opponent to handle. By the way, one small thing, if d5 gets played, then just knight d5, and then there is knight s3 check. And this is bad for white. So this was, yeah, a slightly difficult one, but a really instructive position on provoking weakness in opponent's position. So now, let's go for the next position. So this is black to play here. Now, if you want to attempt this position, please pause the video here and resume once you are ready with the move. So, I can clearly see that there is material imbalance in this position. Black has bishop and knight versus white's rook and pawn. On the other hand, I can also notice that we have a king in the center. The king is active. So, and this knight on e6 is doing a really good job of covering the square. So in case the bishop moves, this won't be possible. Defending this pawn. So that's also a good thing. Of course, on top of defending this bishop as well. So it's there. See, having an active king in the endgame is a good thing. But what's the ultimate goal of having an active king? The ultimate goal of that is to gain the entry square, to get on the opponent's side, and to put pressure on their weaknesses. But that's not possible here. Like this, it's not possible. This is not possible. King f4, yes, we can go. But let's say if white gives something like rook f3 check, where is the king going? Because king g4, it's not like there are that many weaknesses or something there. So queen side is where the action is happening. So we have to be a bit cautious about that. We should try to do something about that. So in this position, black has a really nice way to do that. That is to play bishop d2. What's the idea behind that? See, initially the idea looks very simple. Let's put pressure on this pawn, and if d4 check, then we can win this. So that's great. See, the main point here is if white plays c4, every pawn move creates some weaknesses by provoking white to play c4. The d4 square has gotten weaker. The d4 square is not under control of white anymore. It's time to bring the king. Now the king gets the entry. Now this pawn will get weaker. Now the queenside pawns will get under pressure. But of course, white is not going to give the pawn so easily. But that's fine. We got the king to d4. Now we'll manage slowly but steadily. King f2, bishop g5, bishop h4 is a threat, by the way. King e2, no problem. It's time to activate the king further. So, because king b2 can happen in those pawns, so why should we only focus on that d3 pawn? There are other pawns on the queen side. Opponent can play king d1. No problem at all. We are not in a rush. The king has gotten to c3. a5. Then rook f3. Just b6. Just slowly, just creating this nice on chain. And this base of it is actually defended by the knight. Bishop f4. Rook f3. Just bishop e5. Centralizing the bishop. King c1, like that in this position, and then we can play knight d4, rook h3, c5. So slow pressure continues. So now in this position, so black's pawns have gotten safer. There can be these type of ideas. There can be these type of ideas. There can be these type of ideas as well. And then at some point it will become a bit too much for white to defend. White can go for something like this. Just let's try to activate the rook. But we have this move, a4. Putting pressure on the b3 pawn. And then this capture, this under pressure, this under pressure. Opponent can try to take this pawn, but we are not going to give that b6 pawn. And then this is just too much for white to handle. So please remember in endgame, if you have the active king, that's good. But you need those entry squares. So that's important for you. And bishop d2 provokes white to play c4. And then you get the entry square and then you can make progress. Right, so now let's go for the next position. So this is black to play here, and if you want to attempt this position, please pause the video here and resume once you're ready with the move. So the material is equal, but I like black's position because white has an IQP, isolated queen's pawn. This bishop is a bit restricted because of that. Black's knight is very nicely placed in the center. This rook is also, so this rook is on the open file, this rook is on the open file, so and that's there, but still isolated pawn, this knight being here, and this bishop is a bit restricted, so definitely I prefer black. So what to do? Of course, we need to increase the pressure, and there's a very simple way with which you can we can increase the pressure on white's king side by playing knight f4. So putting pressure over here, yeah. What should white do? By the way, white should not blunder g3 because knight h3 would be a checkmate. So this pawn needs to be defended. It's not just about a pawn. It's about white's king safety as well. So f3 need to be played. But the more pawns you push in front of your king, the weaker your king side becomes. So white's king side has gotten a bit weaker, and it was possible only because black played knight f4, and because that g2 pawn was under pressure, f3 had to be played. Knight takes d3. It's time to get the double bishop advantage. Now it's time to get another knight in the center. This bishop is still restricted. Isolated pawn is still there. Black has gotten double bishop advantage, and because we force white to play f3, their king side has gotten quite weaker. So blacks are doing really well here. Now let's go for the next position. So this is black to play here, and let's try to understand this. So if you want to attempt this position, by the way, please pause the video here and resume once you are ready with the move. So the material is equal. This still seems to be an opening phase and pieces are getting developed, everything. By the way, we have to be a bit cautious because the central pawn is under a bit of a pressure. So yeah, we don't want to give too much activity to the opponent. So what can we try to do here? See, in the opening, there are three things: king safety, development, and center control. So, and if we can do one of that and put pressure on the opponent, then it would be great. So then some of you would be like, okay, let's play d4. That puts pressure on the opponent. Indeed it does. But the thing is that, see, we are, in a way, we are helping our opponent in activating the bishop. There can be some other tweedy chances as well. So we have to be a bit cautious. It's an interesting move, but you should not be like, oh, I see this, let me play this. You should try to make a list of candidate moves. Like, you're able to push this pawn with a tempo. Is there anything else that you can do with a tempo? If you ask yourself that question, then you'll get an answer that there is a really interesting move, bishop g4. You are developing your bishop with a tempo. Now, then you'll be like, wait, how with a tempo? Opponent can play f3 in this position. That's what we were waiting for. f3 has weakened the king side, number one. So even if the castle, the king won't be truly safe. And number two, it blocked this bishop. It blocked that active bishop. Bishop f5, castle, bishop e7. And then this is better for black because, weak king side number one and block bishop number two. That happened because of that provoking move, bishop g4. But after bishop g4, what if bishop f3? No problem at all. We'll maintain the tension between the bishops. Then we can play queen e7 check. By the way, queen e2 would be a blunder because bishop takes f3 and the queen is pinned, so they can't actually recapture. So that's a problem. So let's say if king f1 happens in this position, then the king has gotten weaker. So that's what we got. So bishop f3, queen f3, centralizing the knight with a tempo. And then this is just clearly better for black. So after this, opponent is like, I'll play bishop e2. No problem at all. So long castle, short castle, c. Now in this position, bishop takes e2. How white's position has gotten difficult? Because of g3, the light squares have gotten weaker and the light square bishop just now got exchanged. So if knight c takes 2, then g5, opposite side castling is there now. Black will start going for the pawn storm on the king side, and in the absence of this bishop, it will be difficult for white to handle this. And if knight f takes e2, no problem at all. Now we can restrict this knight. This bishop is not there, so we don't have to worry too much about it. Knight b1 and then h5. We are planning to play h4, and this is not that great position for white to be in, because if h4 type of ideas, we can even think of sacrificing a pawn and then like knight g4, h4 type of stuff. If you want to play calmly, then after h4, maybe moving the knight and then either preparing for direct g5 or f6 and then g5. But one thing is clear, the king side of white is under tremendous pressure. So I hope that with the examples that I discussed with you, you got more perspective about how to provoke weaknesses in your opponent's position. So thank you very much for watching the video, and please provide your valuable feedback in the comments. And lastly, don't forget to check chessneurons.com, your go-to platform for improving your positional chess. And I'll see you in the next video.